Okay, good morning, everyone. We're going to call this meeting of the TRPA Operations and Governance Committee to order. The date is Wednesday, October 25th, 2023. The time is 9:40 in the morning. First item on the agenda is the roll call to determine a quorum. Maria?
Ms. Alding,
Here.
Ms. Bauman,
Here.
Ms. Dis,
Here.
Mr. Honigman,
Here.
Ms. Lane.
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. So I'll go over the remote and in-person meeting rules for the day. For members of the public who are joining us remotely, to observe the meeting, go to trpa.gov under the calendar header. Click on Governing Board Hybrid Meeting for October 25th, 2023. There you'll find a link to the public webinar hosted on Zoom. To address committee members directly with your comments, raise your hand in Zoom by clicking Raise Hand at the bottom of your screen at the appropriate agenda item. With your hand raised, you will be unmuted by TRPA staff and have 3 minutes to address the committee. If you have used the dial-in numbers to join us by telephone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand and be unmuted. For items that are agendized as informational only, we will hear public comment during the general public comment period at the end of the meeting. Comments on items agendized for action or possible action, we will hear public comments before the committee takes any action. To remote committee members, if you wish to speak, you can also now raise your hand in Zoom. You will find the hand icon on the bottom of your screen. Remote committee members, and we have a number of them, may not use the chat box to make any comments or to have sidebar conversations. Please also remember to mute your mic unless speaking to cut down background noise. And finally, I don't think we have anyone here at the dais who is using a computer, so we will dispense with that admonition. Members of the public who have joined us in person, please raise your hand at the appropriate time for public comment, and you will be called on to the front to speak. Committee members and who are in person, please raise your hand if you wish to comment and speak clearly into the microphone in front of you. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Chris?
There are no changes, Madam Chair.
Okay, other than that one correction to the.
There is an errata to item number 3, number 5 on our agenda, and number 3 on the consent calendar.
Right, thank you. Okay, so we will approve the agenda as amended. Let's see, next item, we have a set of minutes from the September 27th, 2023 meeting of the committee. This can be found on page 17 of your packets. This is agenda item number 2. Does any member of the committee wish to make any changes? I see no one raising their hand, either in person or virtually. I do have a couple of minor clerical changes that I've shared with Maria. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the September 27th, 2023 minutes as amended.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We have a motion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay. Did anyone participate remotely? No. Okay. We will deem them approved. That brings us to agenda item number 3, possible recommendation for approval of the September financials. Information on this item can be found on page 61 of your packet.
For the record, Chris Kyler, Finance Director for the agency. I'd also like to introduce Jessica today. She will be taking Tracy's role today, driving the slide charts for everybody, because Tracy is on a very well deserved vacation. So welcome, Jessica. Could I have the first slide, please? We have a lot on our agenda today, so I'll be brief with the financials. There really are no major insights or issues to present. A couple of things that we're watching and tracking. We're 1 quarter into the fiscal year. There's no major liens against our budget. Our labor is on track when you factor in that we're just now completing our annual salary review process, and we'll be handing out those raises shortly. And we do have a few vacancies that are in the process of being filled. Contract payments continue to lag, but they'll catch up. And the state funds are all in, so we're all good there. Planning fees is one thing that we are tracking. They're still above the 5-year average. They're a little bit below last year's. So we're going to keep an eye on that and see how that plays out over the rest of the year. If I could have the next chart, please. On this chart, you'll see that the grant revenues are almost 0. That's because we bill the grants in arrears, and we just finished the 1st quarter of the fiscal year. So we're in the process of billing all those grants right now. So when I come back to you next month, there'll be a big number in there for grants revenues. We do have, the only other really big thing of note is we just transferred the funds for our debt payment. We have a big debt payment that's due December 1st, it actually gets paid at the end of November. And that's $160,000 in interest and $235,000 in principal. There's another debt payment due June 1st, which is interest only, so it'll be about $160,000. So in this chart, you'll see the debt service jumps up, financing jumps up quite a bit there. If I could have the next chart, please. This shows performances against the budget. And as I said, most of the state funds are in. There's a little bit of state money that's still sitting out there. Most of that is TSAC, which we bill on a cost basis. And we still are working with California to get some extra money for salary reviews. The grants are billed in arrears. Planning fees for the first quarter are exactly 25% of the budget. So that sounds like it's on track, but it is a little seasonal, so we're worried about that. The AIS fees are at 38% of budget. Those right now, we're in the process of settling up with all the boat ramps, and so that's why that's normal. Shoreline fees are very low at 15%, but the buoy fees are actually due June 30th. So what you really see this time of year is lagging payments from people who were a little bit late updating their buoy. And the comp, as I said, is pretty much where we expect, given vacancies and the timing of the pay increases. I'd like to have the next chart, please. I update you quarterly on mitigation fees. So far this year, we've taken in about $600,000 and we made $125,000 disbursement to the city. We are distributing another $60,000 this week, so there is some activity there. More to come. This is not the balance. This is just the annual revenue and expenses that will wind up getting reported through on our financial statements due to this GASB change that requires us to recognize mitigation funds as revenue and expenses. Before that GASB change, we were just treating them as basically money's held in trust, and we weren't doing profit and loss on it, but we have to do that now. If I could have the next chart, please. Here we have cash flow with and without mitigation funds. The second chart on the right is the one that shows it with and without. You can see they're almost on top of each other because we haven't really done much on the mitigation fund so far this year. This is the peak of the year. So this is the good times when we have tons of cash sitting around, but that's because all that state money comes in up front, and we're going to drive that down. Over the balance of the year, we're going to be spending far more than we take in cash. The only positive cash inflows would be the grant billings and the fees. And that's all I was going to present on financials, unless somebody has a question.
Okay, all right, Chris, thank you. I appreciate that. Any member of the committee have any questions for Chris regarding the September financials? Okay, well, let's see, you lucked out. All right. In that case, we'll go to public comment on this item. If any member of the public wishes to address the Operations and Governance Committee on this agenda item, please raise your hand now, either in person or by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you will be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. Catherine, anyone online?
Madam Chair, there are no hands raised to comment on this item.
Okay, anyone in the audience joining us? I see mostly staff members. Is there any member of the public wishing to comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, you will go ahead and close public comment. And if there are no last minute comments or questions by the committee, I'll entertain a motion to approve the September financials.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We have a motion. All right. An enthusiastic motion. I like that. Okay.
Love finance.
Mario, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Bellman,
Yes.
Mr. Honigman,
Yes.
Ms. Dis,
Yes.
Ms. Lane,
Yes.
Ms. Aldine.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. Right. So that brings us to the next item, and these items will be discussed in tandem. That's agenda item number 4 and 5. Number 4 is the possible recommendation for approval of the annual inflation adjustments to TRPA planning and mobility mitigation fees. Item 5 is a possible recommendation for approval of the annual inflation adjustments to the rental car mitigation fee. Chris.
Yeah, I'll introduce this, and then Allie will complete the presentation with all the facts and stuff.
And excuse me, by the way, this information can be found on page 79 of your packet.
Just as a reminder, when we did the budget for the year, we did assume that there would be an inflation adjustment to our planning fees. The assumption that we put in the budget was 3.5%. When we pulled the numbers and started running the numbers using the August CPI, that became a 3.9%, so slightly higher than that. August was the most recent CPI number we had at that time. I just checked this week, and the September CPI numbers are out, and it's the same 3.9%. So there's no change between August and September for the Western States CPI. There's a little bit of an anomaly here in that two of the mitigation funds that we're talking about today are actually listed in the rules of procedure as having a different index. Now, the board approved changing the rules of procedure last month, but the 60-day implementation window is still open, so we have to use the old index for this change. So those two are being inflated based on the San Francisco SSMA inflation rate, which is lower than the 3.9%. Going forward, everything we're moving over into the Western states, and that was really the part of the code changes that Arlo was working on, is to make sure everything was standardized and using the same thing everywhere. We still have an open item, which is all the other mitigation fees do not currently have a provision for an inflation adjustment in them, and that's going to be a topic for a future conversation with you. With that, I'll let Allie present the new fees.
Good morning, Ally.
Good morning. So my name is Ali Borowski. I'm a principal planner with the Permitting and Compliance Department. And I'm here to talk about the inflation adjustments. So application fees, as Chris said, will be increasing by 3.9%. The mobility mitigation fee 3.4%, and the rental car mitigation fee a 25% increase. And so this is my 5th time presenting the CPI adjustments to you all, which I think is really cool. You know, it shows, I feel like it's a time of reflection for me personally, and our commitment to consistency, right? And I think also really shows our commitment to achieving our goals. We want our department to be able to fund ourselves. Right now, we're not able to do that with application fees, which essentially is why we do these CPI adjustments, to help us catch up to that and be able to fully fund ourselves. So as you can see, 2018, we did a big increase. In the last 5 years, we've just done the CPI adjustments. So that's, you know, showing our consistency and why we're back here at this time. So again, we're not able to fully fund ourselves, but we are committed to achieving that goal of being able to do that. And these annual adjustments really help with that. So that's what I would like to share with you all, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, short and sweet. All right. Any member of the committee have any questions?
Just one quick question, please. And just want to note that in the staff report, it refers to Thursday as being January 1st, but it's correct in the addendum because it doesn't refer to the day of the week, but really January 1st is a Monday. So just for the
Good
record.
catch. Oh, nice.
Boy, that's sick that I know that, right? It's kind of a bad thing.
I'm going to be carrying the torch when I leave. That's good. All right.
I did want to ask you though,
Yeah.
when you say that you're not at full recovery, where are you in that? Are you like at 70%, 80% full recovery?
That's a good question, and I'm going to punt that to Chris.
Actually, I'm going to punt it to Arlo, because later this morning, Arlo will be talking about fees in general, and that's one of the items, that's a specific item in this presentation. So
Good morning, Arlo.
Good morning. For the record, Arlo Stockham with Stockham Consulting. It varies year to year, and I'll be presenting this in a couple hours, but the shortfall is approximately 30% on average. So it's, you know, the fees are funding about 70% of costs. When we come forward, we'll kind of explain how much of that we're trying to capture with fee adjustments and how much of that through efficiencies.
Thank you. And I'll just kind of piggyback on that. You know, we're talking right now about CPI adjustments, and Arlo is going to be talking later about other adjustments to the fees. So that will be coming with the governing board presentation. And thank you for that January 1st catch there. And just to reiterate or talk about that a little bit, the rental car mitigation fee will be January 1st, but the other fees will go into effect a little bit later in January. And we do that just to give ourselves a little bit of time to work with our MOU partners and also our own staff, because the holidays sometimes get a little crazy.
and I'll take the blame for the Thursday, January 1st. I think I wrote that particular one. It's probably my fault. But I do want to make the point that is, if we can get this planning fund to be self-funding, then that will free up general fund, because right now we're subsidizing them basically with the general fund, and that'll free up resources against the general fund. January 1st for RCMF, because they actually calculated it quarterly with the rental car companies. So it's easier for them if it's the same rate for the entire quarter, as opposed to having to calculate two rates during the course of the quarter.
Just out of curiosity, how many rental car agencies are there in the basin? Do you know?
I want to say 3 or 4, but there's a subtle change in there where it now says rental vehicles, not rental cars. And you may have driven by the place down here on Kingsbury that rents motorcycles and things like that. So we had some conversations about what exactly is a rental car.
Okay, or a rental vehicle, but that's. yeah, yes.
I believe it now
So,
says rental vehicles.
yes, anything that is motorized, so consistent, that could be a skateboard, right? Motorized skateboard. Okay, all right. Thank you. Any comments, any questions further questions by members of the committee on this item? Thank you, Ally, for your presentation. Okay, anyone online wishing to comment on this item? I'm seeing none. We will move on to public comment. Anyone in the room wishing to comment on this item from the public? I'm seeing none. Catherine, anyone online?
Madam Chair, there are no hands raised online to comment on this item.
Okay, thank you. Then we will go ahead and close public comment and move on to a motion. Motion to recommend approval of the attached resolution 2023 as shown on attachment A and exhibit 1 to attachment A, amending the TRPA fee schedule, including the mobility mitigation.
Is this my job?
This is your job. Yes.
So moved.
This is an awesome responsibility. Okay, all right. Yes, we have a motion. All right. Any comments on the question? Seeing none, Mario, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Honigman,
Yes.
Ms. Bowman,
Yes.
Ms. Lane,
Yes.
Ms. Dis,
yes,
Ms. Aldine.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Okay, next motion is to recommend approval of the attached resolution as amended in the errata sheet we received earlier this morning. And I can read that amendment into the record. It's not real substantive. It merely states that there was an omission of a reference to the rental car mitigation fee in the now therefore be it resolved paragraph. So I'll entertain a motion to recommend approval of the attached resolution as amended.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion. Any member of the public wishing to comment on this item, please do so at this time. All right, no one in the audience wishing to comment. Anybody online wishing to comment on this item?
Madam Chair, there are no hands raised online to comment on this item.
Okay, thank you. Then we will close public comment and we have a motion on the floor. Mario, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Dis,
yes,
Ms. Lane,
Yes.
Mr. Honigman,
Yes.
Ms. Bauman,
Yes.
Ms. Aldine.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to agenda item number 6, a possible recommendation for amendment number 4 to the 2023 Federal Transportation Improvement Program. Information on this item can be found on page 101 of your packets. And let's see. Page 101. Thank you. Yes. All right. Okay, and all right, and Judy, you'll be presenting this item. And also in your presentation, I'm sure we've all received a number of online comments regarding this item and a request that will be dealt with at the governing board level with respect to wanting to remove this item from the consent agenda for further discussion at the governing board level. And if you could specifically address the two concerns that seem to be most prevalent. One, the adequacy of public notification and opportunity to participate in the discussion of the trail, and concern about where people will be parking. And then there was a concern about disruption to how disruptive the construction would be.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Judy.
Okay, so for the record, Judy Weber, TRPA Transportation Planner. Next slide, please. So just to get you acquainted with the Federal Transportation Improvement Program, referred to as the FTIP, I want to start with the progression of an FTIP project. It all begins in the Regional Transportation Plan, or the RTP, identifying the projects and programs that are needed to improve Tahoe's transportation system. Once included in the RTP project list, the project can apply for federal funding. When funding is awarded, to move the project forward, it must be programmed into the FTIP through an amendment. So today we have 3 projects being amended into the 2023 FTIP. So the FTIP is the short-term programming document that implements projects in the long-term regional transportation plan. It contains projects that have been vetted through the RTP process and are ready for implementation, anywhere from the preliminary planning to the construction phase. These projects have received federal funding, are regionally significant, or require federal action. The 2023 FTIP needs to be financially constrained. It's a 4-year program of projects for federal fiscal years 23 through 26. And TMPO updates the FTIP every 2 years, and you may recall that the 2023 FTIP was adopted by the governing board last September. As the MPO, our responsibility is to program and maintain the funding in the document. Once a project is programmed, it allows for the implementer to move forward with the authorization of funds and the work to proceed. Throughout the 4-year cycle, there may be revisions to existing projects or projects that need to be amended into the document. These updates may require an amendment, and an amendment is a major change to the FTIP. That can include funding updates greater than 50% of a project cost, adding or deleting a project. So amendments are processed on an as-needed basis and require governing board adoption and state and federal approval. Next slide, please. So, thank you. So Amendment 4 includes 3 projects, 2 California and 1 Nevada. The first project, Microtransit Electric Vehicle Charging Base Station. This is a city project, was awarded $275,000 through the TRPA Regional Grant Program. It will install infrastructure for a charging base station at the city's D Street shop facility. It includes 4 level 2 chargers under a carport with solar panel. This project is phase 2 of the larger South Shore Microtransit Electrification Project that aims to achieve a fleet transition for Lake Link's microtransit vans to electric. Next project is Meeks Creek Bridge. This is a Caltrans project. Funding is funded through the State Highway Operation and Protection Program, known as the SHOP. The project is included in the SR 89 Corridor Management Plan. It's located in Meeks Bay on 89, and it will replace Meeks Creek Bridge, restore the creek channel, address fish passage barriers and wildlife crossings, and also construct a Class 1 bicycle and pedestrian facility. Total cost on this is $25 million. And then the last project is the Washoe County-led Nevada State Line to State Line Bikeway, Crystal Bay to Incline Village. This project was awarded funding through the TRPA grant program also. The project is included in the active transportation plan, the regional transportation plan, the SR 28 corridor management plan, and has been adopted in the, is included in the adopted Washoe County transportation plan. The project will include approximately 2.7 miles of shared use paved trail and transit improvements along Highway 28. The trail will begin in the community of Crystal Bay and end in Incline Village at the intersection of 28 and 431. The project is in the very beginning planning stages. Excuse me. This funding will accomplish the next step, which includes the community outreach and public engagement to determine the appropriate alignment and amenities that may be necessary for the final funding and construction. The total project cost is estimated at $16.2 million. With this project moving forward, there will be, again, public engagement and time for input to have the appropriate alignment discussed and decided upon. So again, this is in the very preliminary stages of a project. So it's just starting to move forward. Next slide, please. So an amendment requires public noticing and a public hearing. The key dates for public input were September 28th. This document was released for a 7-day public comment period, ending on the October 4th. However, the end date was extended to the 16th of October, and this was to accommodate a public hearing at the rescheduled Tahoe Transportation Commission Board meeting. Noticing was provided through the TRPA website and email notification, and no comments were received during the posting. October 16th, at the Commission Board meeting, we held the public hearing, asking for public input, and we also requested recommendation of approval to the TMPO Governing Board. We did receive 2 comments during the public hearing. They were on parking area plans. Those comments were noted and incorporated into the final amendment. One was, does the Meek Creek Bridge include a parking area plan? This project is basically the construction of the bridge, and the Meeks Creek Restoration Project will address parking area management. And then the other the other comment was on the state line to state line incline village project, and the comment just was this will need a significant parking plan due to the increase in traffic for the planned bike path. And also at the meeting, the Tahoe Transportation Commission Board meeting unanimously recommended approval of the amendment. Next slide, please. So final steps, the amendment approval timeline. So formal amendments to the FTIP typically take about 60 days to become active, to provide public feedback, and also the state and federal review and approval. Today, we're seeking governing board adoption of the amendment. After today's action, the amendment will be submitted to Caltrans and NDOT for their review and approval. Then the state will submit to the Federal Highway Administration for the final approval and incorporation into the statewide transportation improvement programs. Final approval will activate the projects in the FTIP, allowing for the authorization of funds and the work to proceed on the projects. Next slide, please. So with that, I thank you. That concludes my presentation, and I'm ready for comments or questions.
Thank you, Judy. Can you tell me of the money that's being allocated or will be allocated if we take this action to amend the FTIP to include these projects with respect to the state line to state line trail? How much is allocated for public outreach? Do you know approximately?
So I can tell you that the project was awarded $1.1 million. What is specifically allocated to public outreach? I cannot answer that, but I do believe Dave Solero from Washoe County is online, and he probably could address that.
Maybe Nick.
Okay, or Nick, I'm sorry.
Good morning, Nick.
Good morning, Nick Haven with the transportation team here at TRPA. Yeah, to speak to the public outreach. So as Judy alluded to, this is essentially a planning phase of the project. And so a portion of that budget that she just mentioned will go to public outreach, a very specific portion. We don't know what that is in terms of a contract award right now from Washoe County, but Washoe County is very aware of not only these comments, but kind of the other implications of the North Demo Trail, the Tahoe Trail, so parking. Obviously, the community outreach is extremely important to Washoe County. This was an outcome. The project was identified as part of the Washoe Transportation Plan as part of their area planning process. And so this is kind of that next step to now engage the public more thoughtfully on what are some options here, and get that planning and public outreach engaged more specifically for this project instead of a broader kind of transportation plan for the area.
So Nick, what is the general timeline?
So this money will be awarded through this action. They will then have to get agreements established with NDOT, which usually takes about 6 to 9 months, unfortunately. And so contract award could be 9 to 12 months away in terms of actually spinning up a public process.
Okay, so in that 9-month period, that'll be the public outreach period. Obviously, you don't want to sign a contract
Well, the
have the
contract would
contract
involve
signed.
the public, so there's no construction contracts, there's no, the project is not moving forward to construction. The
Right.
contract I'm speaking to is actually the planning
Planning
contract
contract.
that includes public outreach.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, great.
Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, thank you, Nick. Any questions from members of the committee on this item? All right, I'm seeing none online. I didn't see anyone here at the dais that been commenting on this or asking a question. So in that case, we will move to.
Shelley, I actually had a question.
Oh, Vince, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand raised.
Yeah, sorry, I know it's terrible online. I wish I could be
No,
there.
no, I just scroll and I do a better job of that. Okay.
No
Thanks.
worries. So a lot of the members of the public asked us to remove this from the consent calendar in our meeting later in the day, but it seems like this is no decisions are being made right now on what we're going to build. It's just on giving the money to plan what we're going to build, so the public will have the ability to really work with NDOT about what they're going to build. So are we going to recommend that this be taken off and hear comments, or because it seemed like people thought we were actually allocating money to build a project that they hadn't had any input on, or are we going to recommend that it stay on consent calendar?
Well, that's a good question. That's a decision for the committee to make. I think John wanted to weigh in. John, did you have a comment? John Marshall?
I think it would be at your discretion as to whether or not you want to say either pull or not pull the item, but the key thing is whether or not you recommend it, that it either
Amending the FTIP.
amend the FTIP or not. That's
Right.
the key recommendation.
Okay. And this committee doesn't have to make a recommendation with respect to pulling this item. That can be done at the governing board level.
Correct.
If any member of the
It
governing board.
will be
wishes to
done at
have
the
it
governing
removed.
board level.
Yes.
It's whether or not you want to make a recommendation on that
Right.
issue.
Right, that's at our discretion. And hopefully some of the folks who wrote letters are online today and will be making comments. Hopefully they've heard that this is merely, allocating money for the planning phase of this project. So there'll be more than ample opportunity for public engagement. So, okay, all right, thank you. Okay, well, and given that, let's move on to public comment on this item. So if any member of the public here in the room wishes to come forward and make a comment, please do so at this time. All right, mostly staff in the audience. Catherine, anyone online wishing to comment on this item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are 3 hands raised online so far. The first hand raised was Steve Teixeira. Steve, if you unmute, you can address the committee.
Thank you and good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. Madam Chair, Steve Teixeira, transportation activist. I heard the public comment at the Tahoe Transportation District Commission meeting last week, and I have reviewed the written comments on it. I urge the committee to pass this forward to the governing board with an affirmative recommendation. I think the record has been clearly established by your comments that this is a planning document, and it does take a long time to put these planning documents into action. So no further delay, please, and go ahead and recommend this item to the governing board. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
The next hand raised is Elise Fett. Elise, if you unmute, you can address the committee.
Good
Hello,
morning.
this is Elise Fett. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
I'm a 30-year resident of Crystal Bay and Incline Village. I see the dire need for this bike path every day when I drive, and I see people having to ride their bikes on this very narrow highway. I also see this bike path as, so not just for commuters every day, for people that are bike enthusiasts that are biking around the lake. And this needs to be a designated bike path with a separated walking path, because it is necessary for community to community transportation. And if you want to also try and get the people that are on e-bikes doing scenic off of the highway, they can get on e-bikes and safely, but they need to be separated. And so please move this forward. It's in desperate need. I have pictures that I have taken, probably 50 of people that are in dangerous situations riding this highway. And it's needed for them to get to work.
Thank you, Elise. Next
The
comment.
last hand raised is Pamela Sigdinos. Pamela, if you unmute, you can address the committee.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. As I mentioned in my written comment, it feels like we're putting the cart in front of the horse here. There are funds being allocated for a project that has not had sufficient community discussion. As we know, that particular area of Crystal Bay is going to be a complete and utter chokehold based on TRPA approved projects at the Waldorf Astoria and a number of other hotels and transportation projects that are underway. We spent 2 hours in traffic going 3 miles this past summer. And I want to tell you that putting in place a plan for a trail in a very complicated area requires more community input before dollars are allocated. Too often, dollars seem to magically appear and projects begin before people have had adequate understanding of what's involved. And I would like to ask the TRPA board to please consider the safety of residents today who find that they cannot get through that area given the current conditions of the road and the number of projects that are already in the works. We just cannot keep layering project on top of project in an area that is a lifeline in the needs of evacuation or snow removal. It just makes no sense. So please think about this as a much bigger picture, not one-off projects. I ask you to please remove this from the consent calendar until there has been sufficient public discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela.
Madam Chair, there are 3 more hands raised. The next hand up, first name on Zoom is Ellie. Ellie, if you can state your full name for the record and unmute to address the committee.
Ellie Waller, thank you for the opportunity today. I am in agreement with Elise Fett. This does need to be a divided path. That is, again, to Pamela's discussion. There's more to this than just the funding. The public that uses this road, there's so many issues with it. Also, we need to engage the local law enforcement as well. Just because you put the trail in doesn't mean the bicyclists will use it. Maybe, and this is painful for me to say, maybe more signage is needed that they cannot use that stretch that is so dangerous. I believe we've got way too much signage these days. Again, public engagement always seems to fall off the radar scope. Having these meetings with no question and answers and just putting stickers up and then having people come back is not the way of the future for the public to participate. You will be getting additional pushback on another segment from the completed incline piece all the way to Spooner through Carson City to Douglas County for a 250 space parking lot. So again, there's more to this than just this one segment. We need to start looking at the bigger picture. And I appreciate the opportunity for many inputs from the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie.
The next hand raised is Kathy Julian. Kathy, if you unmute, you can address the committee.
Thank you for this opportunity. I just want to express some concern that the planning of this project is not simply allocating some small amount of money in the scheme of things to public consultation. That will be an add-on, because this construction of this trail is going to be so complex and potentially dangerous to the incline Crystal Bay community because of wildfire evacuation issues, because of traffic issues. So it does require more upfront discussion, and certainly not the usual, oh, yes, we'll have a component with the consultant to go out and talk to the community about this project. Please understand the significance of this stretch of road and the complexity with the Waldorf and the Cal Neva and the private housing construction along there. It is going to be a real challenge for Washoe County and TRPA. So thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Two more hands, Madam Chair. The next hand raised is Robert Lober. Robert, if you unmute, you can address the committee.
Yes, good morning, Robert Lober. I'm a 34-year resident, North Lake Tahoe, Incline Village, Crystal Bay. I think a lot of people are assuming this might be run right along the highway. That may not be the case for numerous reasons. It could be run above the highway as well. And I'd just like you to take into consideration this might be some type of an alternate evacuation route if it's made wide enough. We do have a real chokehold here in Crystal Bay, and this might be an alternative for us from a safety standpoint for emergency evacuation. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
And the last hand raised is Doug Flaherty. Doug, if you unmute, you can address the committee.
Thank you, Chair, and members. Doug Flaherty, TahoeCleanAir.org. This is simply another destination project to increase tourism in Lake Tahoe, something the TRPA is now famous for. It's going to do nothing but increase human overcapacity. The TRPA continues to fail to consider cumulative impacts on safety, wildfire evacuation, environmental issues, and to simply overlook the hazards that are going to come with increased destination projects. You failed to consider the cumulative impacts of these projects since 2012. And I don't know the last speaker. I'm sure he's a really nice guy, but the truth of the matter is this is going to further complicate evacuation and panic during a wildfire at this choke point of Crystal Bay, in the Crystal Bay area. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, there are no other hands raised to comment on this item.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. And we will go ahead and close public comment on this item. Any comments by members of the committee before we take this to a vote? All right, seeing none. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, Julie, please. Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. I just wanted to thank the members of the public for their comments and just address a couple of them before you take your vote and your action. A couple things. I think it's important to note in how the federal and other state funding mechanisms work. There's such a long process involved, and the public sometimes doesn't see all the steps. And I think it's important to note, for example, the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act. We talk a lot about the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act, which has funded, scores of environmental projects here at the lake. You first passed an authorization bill in the Congress, which we have for $415 million. And then intuitively, you might think that money just comes with that, but it doesn't work that way. It has to be appropriated, and that happens every year. And so out of this bill now that's almost expiring in a short order, out of 415 million, we've only seen, under 115 million in direct appropriations. So it's a two-step process. And the way that our transportation programs work follows that model. You have to program these monies well in advance of a project being designed and engineered and communicated and engaged around the public. So that's what's happening. There will be a lot of opportunities for public engagement, and there should be. Just think back to our meeting in Kings Beach when you as the board approved the parking lot on Highway 28, and we talked a lot about safety in that corridor. There is a corridor management plan around this very area that law enforcement has signed on to, and all the parties, over a dozen different entities have signed on to that we'll be leaning on for these projects to be designed properly. TRPA is doing a series of webinars around environmental improvement projects. Just last week, we did one, what's happening on the South Shore. So we'll commit to do another one, at the right time to make sure that people have more time to get questions answered outside of the scope of this meeting. So just wanted to share a few thoughts as you move into your deliberations. Thanks.
Thank you, Julie. Okay.
And Madam Chair,
Yes.
just a question for you. It sounds to me like the public that's asking that this be removed from consent maybe believe that that means the item wouldn't be discussed by the TMPO today, but my understanding of if we make a recommendation to the TMPO to take it off consent, it just means it's heard publicly.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we had an understanding about that.
That is correct.
Okay.
Right. It's just to provide an opportunity for the people who have concerns about the project or who may misunderstand this first phase of the project, an opportunity to address the full board and not just members of this committee.
Gotcha. Okay.
So with that, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd be prepared to make a motion.
Okay, please do.
See what the committee thinks. I think that the Ops Committee would recommend adoption of the 2023 Federal Transportation Improvement Program Amendment Number 4 as presented, but also recommend that the TMPO pull the item from consent so that the public has an opportunity to hear this item in its entirety.
That would only be the item concerning the state line to state line, Crystal Bay to Incline Village.
Yes,
non-motorized.
correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion. Any discussion by members of the committee on this item, on the motion as proposed? I see heads. Yes, go ahead, John. Did you have a comment?
The agenda item is for a FTIP amendment that includes 3 items. So I just want to make clear that your recommendation would just be, so we need to split out then the
State line to state line trail.
and only hear that as a
Correct.
separate agenda item.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
Correct. Yes. Okay. All right. So we have a motion. Looking around the room, nobody online interested in weighing in on this. Okay. So Mario, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Bowman,
Yes.
Mr. Honigman,
Yes.
Ms. Dis,
yes,
Ms. Lane,
Yes.
Ms. Aldine.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Okay. Thank you so much. All right. That brings us to item number 7, a possible recommendation to approve amendment number 1 of the FY 2023-24 Lake Tahoe Transportation Overall Work Program. Information on this item can be found on page 129 of your packets.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Michelle Glickert, I'm the Transportation Planning Program Manager.
Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning. Today, I'm seeking recommendation of approval of our amendment to our overall work program. And I'll give you just a little bit of background. The tasks and the budget that we prepare for the work program, we also refer to that as our OWP, are prepared each fiscal year. And so that means we actually begin this process in the winter, and then we seek our approval towards the end of June, so that July 1, we have an approved budget and work plan in place. The transportation program tasks are folded into then the transportation or the TRPA operations work plan. And that's something you also see, right, from our chief operating officer, John Hester. So we fold those two in together. However, as the Tahoe Metropolitan Planning Organization, being a recipient of those federal funds, we must formally amend the transportation planning overall work program from time to time throughout the fiscal year via a resolution from this board. So with preparation, starting so early, many of our revenue sources must be estimated and anticipated how we'll be spending them, before June 30th. So this is identified as our carryover funding in our budget. Once the fiscal year closes out, we receive our final budget. usually in the fall. We then must amend these changes back into our overall work program. Next slide. This slide details the total budget changes. A full red line document was posted last Monday on our planning work program page. And then of course the agenda rolled out last Wednesday with all of those detailed changes. Our planning budget primary sources, so that transportation planning overall work program, those primary sources are the federal highways from the Federal Highways Administration, the Federal Transit Administration, the Transit Development Act. These are all planning funds that we receive, along with California road maintenance and rehab funding through SB1. And then of course, the TRPA kind of local general fund that we use to match those funds. With a small decrease in the grant funds of just 1,000. So Caroline from our finance department did a great job. We came in pretty close. Our grant funds are estimated just a small decrease that will be folding in of $1,311. And then an increase for salary adjustment. So this was a great opportunity for us to also then address those budget changes. Next slide. So that is it for my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. And I hope it's clear for your decision today.
Thank you, Michelle. I just had a quick question. The increase for salaries of almost $77,000. I'm assuming that's in staffing and direct costs. I couldn't find it actually in the table.
Are you looking at the staff report?
I'm looking at the staff.
Yeah, so I'll point out how it's addressed in there. So the staff report is found on page 129. So where you'll see it is those blue tables, well, the bright blue and white tables there. That's on page
130 and 131.
Yeah, on page 130. So in there, you'll see it's really a grid. The top half of the table are our revenue, are our direct costs. The bottom half is the TMPO staff.
Okay.
And so within the red line document and shown here, there's the column that notes increase and decrease. You see that?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's where you'll see those changes. We have a pretty complicated grant fund here and a budget that goes along with it. So every work element, we break up our work plan into over 8 work elements. Each of those work elements are assigned several staff from TRPA. And so that lower half there is what you're kind of looking at, Shelley. That details all the TMPO staff hours and dollars. And so each one of those work elements had to be amended for that change in our salaries.
Okay, so it's embedded in different line items.
Exactly. So in the overall work program, there's a budget table. Each one of those 8, well, actually 108 has 3 tables. Each of those tables will showcase exactly where those changes are made. That total was about a little over $76,000 over all of those work elements, over all the staff. We have over probably 7 or 8 staff members in our budget, not all full-time. So yeah, it's a fun process.
Okay,
And
great.
again, giving a shout out to Caroline and the finance department. She is our grant manager. We've worked together now a couple years, so we've got the process down. But if there's any way I can, help address, educating you all and showcasing those details, I'm happy to make those changes in the future. too.
Well, one thing you might do, I don't know if you can add a column, is just indicate where the line items have been, where those increases have been embedded in the line.
Yeah, so in the
items
red
by
line
amount.
document, those
don't
change,
have.
we call them the change tables,
Right.
are there in that column that identifies increase and decrease.
Okay.
Is there for each of those work elements.
So the total would add up to the 76.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Any questions from members of the committee regarding this item? You see online, I don't see any hands raised. Okay. All right, let's move on to public comment on this item. Any member of the public with us today in the room wishing to comment on this item, please come forward. Okay, seeing no one rushing to the podium. All right. Catherine, anyone online?
Madam Chair, we have 1 hand raised online so far. Ellie Waller, if you unmute, you can address the committee.
Thank you. Ellie Waller, in reading the draft amendment that's attached for the work plan on page 39, T3, evaluate regional and community parking management. I'm sure that part of that budget, or should be part of that budget, are in some of the issues that were brought up today about parking for various areas. Is that part, I guess it's a question, is that part of the overall work plan to look at the proposed 250 space parking lot at the intersection of State Route 28 and US 50, the Meeks Bay? I know they're et cetera. And I know that they're also project driven, but is there overarching work being done through this overall work plan? Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Michelle, you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, although that's not necessarily the item before us, I'm happy to answer if that's okay, Mr. Marshall. Yeah, absolutely. So parking management, I think you all know, is one of the strategies we have to employ for that bigger regional planning vision. And we do understand the need, not always to build more, but to manage what we have before we build more. So I do believe Ellie's referring to what's in work element 108, where we do want to explore how we can employ technology and other sources to help us manage what we have today and consider what we're building. SR 28 was brought up earlier. That's the corridor management plan. It takes a look at transit, parking management, and the trail, all actually helping us together, all of those different elements and options. So absolutely, that is in our work program for this next year.
Okay.
Now, specifically, in different locations, I think what you probably want to understand, and we'll be talking more about this year as the regional plan, regional transportation plan rolls out, is it's an element in all that we do is looking at parking and what we have to, accomplish to get us to actually reach those other goals that we have.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that clarification. All right. Catherine, anyone else online?
No, Madam Chair, there are no other hands raised.
Great. All right, then we will go ahead and close public comment and bring this back to the committee for action. Someone care to make a motion to recommend adoption of the attached resolution approving amendment number 1 of the FY 2024 TMPO overall work program as contained in attachment A?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Okay, we have a motion. Any comments on the question? Seeing none, Mari, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Honigman,
Yes.
Ms. Baumann,
Yes.
Ms. Lane,
Yes.
Ms. Dis,
yes,
Ms. Aldine.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
All right, thank you. That brings us to agenda item number 8, which is the quarterly treasurer's report. Information on this item can be found on page 273 of your packet, Chris.
For the record, Chris Carroll, Finance Director, and good news for you, this is a part of the agenda you don't actually vote on, it's just information. We're working on getting our investment advisor, Bruce Remington, coming in to do an annual briefing for you guys. We're planning on doing that in November, but we're having some scheduling difficulties, so that may slip out until January. A lot of stuff going on in the, can I have the next chart, please? A lot of stuff going on in the fixed income market. The Treasury is getting ready to release basically a record amount of new debt issues in order to fund deficits and rebuild their cash. And there's some questions in the market about capacity to buy all that debt up, especially since other outside buyers like the Chinese have their own financial problems and aren't doing that stuff. This has caused the yield curve to change. It's been very flat, now starting to tilt up again, which is normal, but it means the 10-year Treasury just went above 5% the other day. Your standard 30-year mortgages now are above 8%. The good news for us is because we have cash in the bank, we're earning more money from our deposits. These increasing rates will create short-term unrealized losses in our portfolio, but we hold the maturity, so we won't ever actually realize those losses, and we will earn more money in the future on our investments. The biggest ones there really are the mitigation funds and the securities that we're holding. So we'll make more money, but it's not necessarily good for the economy or anything like that. Just looking at the graphs up there, a couple of things. I'm using the S&P ratings now, and S&P rates the Treasury, so that's why you have a huge green block of AAAs up there. If you'd like, I can remove the treasuries from this so that you can actually see the other data in terms of ratings of securities. And then I'll just call out on the pie charts. We have a huge amount shown as being in investment pools. That's the LAIF account that I use for cash management. And we're flush with cash right now because we just got $7.5 million, $8 million from the states. That'll run down over the rest of the year. So we transfer the money in there so we can earn some income. And then we've already started drawing down on it to cover expenses for the balance of the year. That's pretty much it for my treasurer's report, unless you have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Short and sweet. Any comments by members or questions by members of the committee? Anyone online wishing to comment? I don't see anyone interested in commenting. I know that we're not required, I guess, to take public comment on this item, but I'm going to do so anyway. Any member of the public in the audience wishing to comment on this item, please come forward. All right, seeing none. Catherine, anyone online?
Madam Chair, there are no hands raised online to comment on this item.
Okay, then we'll go ahead and close public comment. Again, this was informational only. Next item is agenda item number 9, which is a briefing on the procurement policies update. This is informational only as well. Chris.
Actually, I'd like it to be a little more than information. I'd like to get your feedback because what we want to do is we want to bring to go out in the future meeting, either in November or December, a draft procurement policy for you to approve. And I'd like to make sure that it's something that you will approve and you would like to approve. So please give me your feedback, and I invite members of the board who are not members of this committee to also provide the input so that we know what you are willing for us to do on here.
Chris, after today's discussion, could you send this out to the members of the board? And if you want to solicit feedback.
Sure.
Between now and the next meeting. Thank you.
Yeah. The red line is, we'll get into this in just a minute.
Okay.
The procurement policy hasn't been updated since 2008. So a few years ago, OMB did a whole massive change in terms of federal procurement rules and stuff like that, including the rules that apply to us, to state and local entities that are executing on funds that we receive from the OMB. And that's kind of been the inspiration for making this change here. The 2 states have not updated their procurement rules to match the OMB change. So what we are proposing here will be, in some respects, a deviation from the Nevada and the California internal procurement rules, if you are willing to go there. We can, but we don't have to. Under the OMB rules, you can always have more restrictive rules in there, so we're good either way. There's kind of 3 things that we're doing here that are different. The first one I want to talk about is a conceptual change. Right now, what you have for approved by the board is a procurement manual. It's like 70 pages long. It goes into excruciating detail in terms of which forms you fill out and who has to sign off on what. And it's got a bunch of duplicative rules and stuff like that. We don't think that makes sense. What we want to do is we want to divide this into 2 documents. A policy document, which is a controlling document, and comes here and that you would approve as a board. And then there's a how-to manual for staff that says, here's the form you fill out. Here's where you have to advertise an RFP. Here's where you have to do all that administrative stuff to execute on a contract. So what I'm proposing to bring forward to you is a policy document that's going to be a lot shorter. It's going to be like 15, 20 pages long. So that's the first conceptual change there. And I'll pause if somebody wants to comment on whether or not you're comfortable with that.
No, I think that's fine. I mean, it's just for review and consideration.
Okay. Most of the manual is pretty much, most of the rules aren't really changing that much. There's kind of 3 things in here that are new. The dollar levels for different types of procurement, and I'll walk you through that in just a minute. We are implementing a new credit card program. We finally got a decent purchasing card program that we're about to roll out. That'll be used for small purchases and stuff like that. And then in our procurement policy, there's a list of situations where we believe that doing a full competition with RFPs and stuff like that doesn't make sense. And instead of that, we use what we call negotiated procurements. And so we're proposing to add a few items to that list, and I'll go over those in detail. Just to baseline you on the current rules, if I could have the next chart, please. The board, the procurement policy delegates to the executive director the role of purchasing agent. So Julie is the purchasing agent for TRPA. She can approve all contracts that are in the budget. She can approve contracts that aren't in the budget up to $100,000. Any contract that isn't under the budget, isn't in the budget, but over $100,000, we bring to you here at the board.
So technically, that would be 999,000. Well, that would be, what, 99,000, not 100,000. It's
For
less.
the record,
than
we don't have any
100,000.
$99,999.
No. Yeah, that's wishful thinking on my part, but it would be 99,999, right? Because it's less than, so
Yeah.
it's not, okay.
We don't usually have that because we take a lot of care, obviously, to
Right.
budget correctly, things like that. So overall, and Julie has delegated some signature authority down to lower levels too, just to keep all the little stuff off her desk, and she doesn't have to prove everybody's expense reports and things like that. But overall, what we're targeting to here is to follow these revised OMB rules.
So Chris, pardon me for interrupting. The current policies that contracts that are not in the budget and over 100,000 require board approval.
Yes.
Okay, and that is a standard that we have been adhering to.
Yes.
Historically, and that's been in effect for.
This particular procurement policy was done in 2008. It's in that one. I don't know what they did before.
Okay, and that right, for the requirement, the board approve anything in excess of $100,000 cannot be delegated, right? Has to come before the governing board.
Well, you could delegate to her if you wanted to change that rule.
Okay. Well, instead of changing that rule, you just increase the amount that she can spend without governing board approval. Okay.
$100,000 is a big contract.
It
So
is.
it doesn't
It
happen
is.
very often.
It is. Yeah.
Okay. If I couldn't have the next chart, please. This one shows the different approval ratings. And it kind of divides up into three types of procurement. One is a micro procurement, and the micro procurement, you just go buy it. Okay. Then there's this intermediate level, that's a small purchase. And that's where you call around, you get some quotes. Maybe you go online, look at people's websites. We try to get at least 3 competitive quotes, and then we go ahead and purchase the items. And then the biggest ones that's reserved for the larger dollar value is the ones where you do a formal RFP. You issue an RFP, you give people a chance to bid on it. We've reached out to as many contractors or potential vendors as we can find. Working in the basin, there's a lot of issues that we just can't find that many bidders on some of these things. But we're going to do the whole route, and then you have a formal submission of a bid, and you review the bids, and you select a contractor. Right now, that small procurement level is $5,000, and that's the same level for the states as us. And we'd like to up that to about $10,000. The federal standard is $35,000, but we weren't proposing to go that high. That intermediate step of informal is between that $5,000 and $25,000 level. And we're proposing to change that, so it'd be between $10,000 and $50,000 level. In our budget.
But there's no range here. I mean, so, and there's no less than 50,000.
Yeah, it's kind of, it kind of increments up if you look at the proposed TRPA. 10,000 and below would be micro, 50,000 to 10,000.
Okay.
And then over 50,000.
For clarity,
I should have
think
put in the range.
Yeah, it should be included.
Just as an FYI, I looked in our budget. Since we're raising that from 25 to 50,000, we had a total of 37 contracts in our budget for this year that would be impacted by this change. That would move from being a formal RFP to being an informal competitive. And then everything above 50,000 remains as a formal RFP, and that's no different than today. So this is where I'd like to stop and see what you feel about these revised limits. They're less than the OMB. They're more than California and Nevada, who are continuing their old system. But this would be an efficiency move on our part.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Chris. Any comments or questions by members of the committee on this item? Again, we're not taking action on this item. This is just kind of a preview of what's to come. Vince, Jessica, any comments? Seeing none, continue, Chris.
Okay. Then the next chart, please. We have a set of exceptions to competitive procurements, RFP process. These are some new ones that situations we've come across. The biggest example is we're partners with TRCD and the AIS prevention program. This is actually one of our largest contracts. It's over $1 million. We've been working with them ever since day one of the program. There really aren't any other people that we know of that do that sort of work. And just to clarify for those of you who aren't familiar with it, they run the actual inspection and decontamination stations. So what they have to do every spring is they have to go out and hire a whole bunch of key people for a seasonal job at an inspection station. They have to train them up, and then they have to monitor and supervise them, pay them during the course of the year. And then we get to the end of the season and they lay them all off and go over and over again. Not the kind of task that we would like to do ourselves. TRCD has stepped up and does this. So what I'd like to do there is to establish basically a long-term strategic relationship with them and to go around the RFP process and just do basically a sole source negotiated contract with them.
And we look at, salary ranges, competitive, make sure that they're competitive and in line. I know this is kind of unique work.
Yeah, that has happened in the past that they've came on we've been under contract and the contract has some variability in each year. And so we have to reset all that stuff. So we've had those conversations, conversations with them because they continue. And I'm sure you're aware last year they had trouble staffing the stations and the stations had to close from time to time because they didn't have staffing. But we sit down with them and negotiate that with them. I don't know if you want to supplement that.
I'll just add to that, Kim Chevalier for the record. I think this type of agreement I would refer to as like an interagency agreement with another government agency. TRCD is a government agency, and we would like them to carry out a service, through our agreements with them of a service we want to provide that we couldn't do on our own. And so I think there are other examples. The Forest Service has interagency agreements with us and other partners where they can give funding to implement mostly like environmental improvement program elements. So it would really help implementation of the EIP, basically, to be able to do similar type of contracting agreements that our partners can do. Just want to add that.
Kim, would this be an MOU or would it be a contract between TRCD and ourselves?
I think we need to figure out what the best mechanism is. I see it as an interagency agreement. If that's an MOU, it seems like it's more of an MOU than a contract, but Chris probably would want it.
It's currently a contract. I would actually want to keep it as a contract because there are a number of other non-financial issues that need to be covered in terms of liabilities and things like that.
Not only that, MOUs or memorandums of understanding. I don't know how legally binding they are. Contract.
An MOU is a contract, I mean, basically.
Is it a contract? I always thought of it as more of an intent between parties.
It can operate in multiple different ways, including having a binding effect. I think contractual obligations are a little more serious. So, I would probably lean towards Chris' preference for a contract.
I would too.
Yeah, I mean, just to use an example, and this is why we want to have continuity with staff is if you screw up during the inspection, you can damage a boat. And then we have to pay to have the boat fixed and things like that. So that's why I'm saying there's some liabilities out there behind just paying the staff, like things like that. So that's why I prefer it to the contract.
Okay.
Any other questions on this particular example? Because this is a big one. I mean, this is really big.
Yeah, this is a big one.
Complete revisit of our relationship with TRCD. And it could apply also to the control program as well, because there are partners in control who do control work with us.
Right, and that, Madam Chair, that would be kind of my only caution would just be, I'm struggling with this with El Dorado County. We have $1 billion annual budget and lots of contracts coming before us all the time. And there are ways that you can sidestep the RFP process, the formal one. And some of them are kind of this kind of example, sole source. And I just would want to make sure that maybe if we put this in play, we came back and looked at it 2-3 years later and kind of analyzed how was it being used by staff? Do we have to put tighter controls around it? Because I understand how time consuming this is for staff. And quite frankly, it's sometimes a pain, but it benefits the public in that it makes sure that we're getting the best prices and the best deals that are out there with the monies that we have. So it's a delicate balance.
I think it's a reasonable request. I'd also point out, I mean, in this case, the problem is we could do an RFP. We could write one up, we could issue it, we could spend 3 months processing through it. And at the end of the day, we're going to award the contract to TRCD.
So let me ask you, Chris, have we, if we've gone out for competitive bids, have we gotten any competitive bids?
We've only did this once about 5 years ago, and we had 2 bids. TRCD and one other.
And so, yeah, just to jump in, Madam Chair, Julie Reagan, TRPA Executive Director, we had, we started this program 15 years ago, and there really wasn't the capacity out there to do this except for the Conservation District at the time. And then it's been 5 years since we did our only bid at my urging, for the reasons that Member Lane is referencing. We have high visibility with this program. We have extensive federal dollars. We have, boat inspection fees. It's a public-private partnership. And so we wanted to do our due diligence, and we really had no other viable options except for the Conservation District. So that's playing into this point. And I see Dennis is right at the podium to jump in.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. When we did the RFP 5 years ago, we only, Dennis Abaglo, Aquatic Invasive Species Program Manager for TRPA. We only did receive one bid. We had a round of questions that we had multiple entities provide questions that we responded to publicly, but only one bid was received, and that was by Tahoe RCD.
Okay, thank you. But, to be cautious, maybe the thing to do is to build into the policy that, we put it out for a competitive bid every 5 years. Because there may be a new organization that emerges, that can do it more competitively.
Well, that actually is our current policy, is to do bids every 5 years, and that's what we're asking for an exemption for in this case, is to not do it every 5 years. Their contract, for example, is coming to a conclusion now, and we don't see anybody on the horizon that could do this work.
Kim Chevalier, maybe I'll add on to that. That is, our current policy. We did the RFP, last one was 5 years. So we're just getting to the end of TRCD's current contract right now. Even with that in place, we still do an annual review and budget for them every year. So I think there's ways that we can make sure we're competitive in the pricing without having to necessarily do a full RFP every 5 years. So we might want to explore that.
The question is, do we know if there's another organization, for example, that comes into view who may be more competitive? Because obviously aquatic invasive control and prevention is becoming more and more common around the world. And so there may be another organization that could be more competitive. I mean, I don't know what the compromise is every 6 years, every 7 years. I think we just need to revisit it periodically. And the only way to do that is to put on an RFP.
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be an RFP. We could just have a review of the relationship here at the board level every 5 years and see whether we want to continue with the existing relationship or conduct a formal RFP.
Well, it's not the relationship that I'm questioning. I'm just questioning our knowledge of the universe of other, organizations that could provide a similar service. And I'm not sure, maybe the staff is doing this on a daily basis. We'll come in contact with somebody who might be, a competitor to TRCD.
Let me put Dennis on the spot, because he is a member of a national group studying this stuff. Are you aware of anybody that has an actual outside contractor doing it?
The only entity I'm aware of is the state of Colorado, and they have a private entity doing it in some of their remote locations. Their model's a little bit different than ours. Sorry, again, Dennis Abaglo, Aquatic Invasive Species Program Manager for the record. They have their model is doing inspections at every single water body where we have what we refer to as an off-highway inspection program. So that in some remote areas of the state, they'll have a private contractor, but their state staff are the ones that generally do the inspections, and that's pretty typical throughout the West.
So Dennis, there are no private companies that do this work?
There's only one that I'm aware of, and that's the one that does these remote facilities.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, well, I mean, this is just a discussion item. Obviously, you'll be bringing back a formal proposal, and we can discuss it further at that time.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, we'll try to wrap some of these comments in. Like I said, if anybody else has any comments on that. Just a couple other quick examples. Another one is where we're teaming with other entities. Once we put together a joint proposal or something like that, we could be the lead or somebody else could be the lead. And in that case, if you've already submitted the request for the grant with all the partners laid out, then we shouldn't then turn around and do an RFP for the partners that participated in the thing. Kind of on the other side of it, we also want to just accept other partners. If we're not the lead, we'll just accept the other partners' procurement policies. For example, we've done EIS contract joint with Placer County. Placer County took the lead. They issued the contract under their procurement rules. The way our policy says is that we have to validate that their rules match ours, which is a little arrogant.
Can you, when you bring this back in final form, could you elaborate a little bit, you know, in terms of stating what our current policy requirements are?
Sure.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Sure. And then another AIS example is in order for the program to work, we have to have a contract with every single boat ramp. There's no point in doing an RFP because we're not selecting one. We're going to do a contract with every single one of them, and we have to do a contract with every single one. So these are the exceptions that I'd like to talk about and get your feedback on. And give us some good conversation. I did throw in an extra chart on here that just lists the current exceptions, but we don't need to talk about that. So if anybody else has any input they would like to give us, or if you want to think about this and send me an email afterwards.
Yeah, that's fine. If you could just send it out to the entire board, because it'll have to come back before the board, obviously, with a recommendation from ops, but that will give them, you know, an opportunity to weigh in.
Okay.
We'll figure out how to do that consistent with the open meeting law.
I'm sorry?
We need to just how to figure out how to do that consistent with the open meeting law. But
Well, as long as the entire board isn't all.
deliberating, and so we'll figure out the best way
Okay,
to do that.
that's fine. That's fine. However you want to handle it, that would be fine. Okay, thank you for that admonition. I appreciate that, John. Okay, does that conclude your presentation, Chris?
I guess the question then from my standpoint is, do you want to have another session just on ops next month to go over this stuff in more detail?
Please.
And then we'll hold off on bringing it forward to the board until December.
That would be great. That would be great. And if you could just address the questions that the committee has had and maybe, you know, put in some red line comment on existing policy, and so we know exactly how the policy is changing and what the implications are.
Okay.
That would be great. Thank you. All right.
That's it for this item then.
Okay.
If we can skip ahead to upcoming topics, it'll be really, really short.
All right.
I told you we're trying to get Bruce to come in November. We'll have the audit for you in December. I haven't heard anything different on that. And that's kind of the major activities coming forward.
All right. So that dispenses with agenda item number 10 or number 7. Somehow it is 10, right? Agenda item number 10. So we're on agenda item number 11, committee member comments. Any member of the committee wish to make any further comments? Looking online, I don't see any hands raised. I'm seeing heads wagging back and forth, so I'm assuming they're not interested in making any further comments. With that, that brings us to the second to the last item on the agenda, which is a general public interest comment period. If any member of the public wishes to address the committee on this at this time, please raise your hand now, either in person or by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you will be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. Okay, anyone in the room joining us here this morning wish to comment on any item not agendized? Seeing none. Catherine, anyone online?
No, Madam Chair, there are no hands raised online to comment.
All right, great. In that case, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
You have a motion. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the governing board meeting will commence in 5 minutes. So that will